There is an episode in the history of the Second World War that still raises many questions among historians. We are talking about an event called the Miracle of Dunkirk, the large-scale evacuation of Allied troops across the English Channel, which paradoxically was allowed to be carried out by Adolf Hitler himself. The spring of 1940 was a turning point in the European campaign. On May 10th, the German command launched an operation codenamed Plan Gelb. German troops launched a rapid offensive that took the Allies by surprise. By May 20th, the situation for the Allied forces had become critical. The Wehrmacht tank divisions had broken through to Abbeville, creating a real threat of encirclement by a large group of enemy troops. 40 combat-ready divisions of British, French, and Belgian troops were trapped in the Dunkirk port area. Panic gripped the Allied high command. "We are defeated! We are completely defeated!" These words of French Prime Minister Reynaud, transmitted to London, vividly illustrate the prevailing mood at that time. Realizing the catastrophic situation, Winston Churchill decided 2 days later to begin the evacuation of troops. The operation was codenamed Dynamo. The initial forecasts were extremely pessimistic. The Allied command expected to save no more than 45,000 people, given that the German tanks were only 16 kilometers from Dunkirk. And suddenly, the inexplicable happened. On May 24, 1940, Adolf Hitler issued an order prohibiting the use of tank formations in this sector of the front. This decision became one of the most mysterious pages of the Second World War because literally one order could change the fate of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and possibly the entire course of the war. To this day, military historians and researchers are puzzling over the motives that prompted Adolf Hitler to give one of the most controversial orders of the Second World War. The situation for the Allies was catastrophic. Their troops were trapped, being completely unprepared for a large-scale evacuation. German tank divisions, being at a distance of a day's march from Dunkirk, could easily break through to the port and destroy tens of thousands of enemy soldiers. However, the unexpected happened. The Führer issued an order categorically forbidding tank units to approach Dunkirk closer than 10 kilometers. The Wehrmacht was only allowed to use artillery, aviation, and infantry units to conduct operations in the area. It is noteworthy that this order was transmitted through open communication channels, which allowed the Allies to immediately learn about it. Many military experts believe that such a leak of information was deliberate, aimed at giving British troops a chance to evacuate to their islands. Among the top commanders of the Wehrmacht, Hitler's decision caused serious dissatisfaction. The entry in the diary of General Franz Halder is particularly revealing. "We missed precious time, which is why the encirclement of the French and British forces was much slower than it could have been." The most annoying thing is that the stoppage of the mechanized formations did not allow us to close the encirclement ring off the coast, and now we can only watch as thousands of enemy soldiers literally flee to England under our noses. On May 26, 1940, one of the largest military evacuations in history began. Hundreds of transport vessels of various classes and sizes were mobilized to rescue Allied forces from the besieged Dunkirk. Despite regular Luftwaffe air raids and incessant artillery shelling, the port continued to function. German infantry units made persistent attempts to break through to the port facilities, but the combined forces of French and British troops successfully held defensive positions. The lack of tank support significantly reduced the effectiveness of German attacks. Breaking through the well-fortified Allied defense line without armored vehicles turned out to be an almost impossible task. The British Royal Air Force played a significant role in the success of the evacuation, providing reliable air cover for the operation. The German Air Force suffered significant losses in the air battles over Dunkirk, which led to a gradual decrease in the intensity of their attacks. Operation Dynamo, which lasted from May 26 to June 4, exceeded the most optimistic expectations of the Allied command. During this period, 338,000 soldiers and officers were evacuated to the UK. Although some servicemen died from their wounds during the sea crossing, 337,000 people reached the English shores safely. However, the successful evacuation of manpower had its price. The acute shortage of transport vessels forced the Allies to leave a huge amount of military equipment on the French coast. Tens of thousands of pieces of military equipment, Thousands of tons of fuel and ammunition remained on the shore, material losses that had to be replenished over a long time. Why did the Führer spare the British troops? The mystery of Hitler's strange order regarding Dunkirk is still the subject of lively debate among historians. The Führer himself took the real motives for this decision with him, leaving us only the opportunity to speculate and analyze various versions of events. Among the many theories, several main hypotheses deserve special attention. According to one of the most popular versions, Adolf Hitler viewed the trapped British soldiers as a potential trump card in a political game. It is assumed that he planned to use the fate of 300,000 soldiers as leverage in possible negotiations with Winston Churchill. This theory finds some confirmation in the fact that even before the start of the military campaign, the leadership of the Third Reich attempted to reach a diplomatic agreement with Great Britain. Historical documents show that Hitler did not seek a full-scale war with the British, focusing his attention mainly on continental Europe. However, this version has significant contradictions. First of all, the actions of the German troops at Dunkirk did not correspond to the logic of preserving potential hostages. German forces continued to conduct intensive artillery bombardment of Allied positions and carried out regular air raids on the evacuation area. If the goal had been to capture British soldiers for subsequent negotiations, such aggressive actions would have seemed impractical. In addition, there is no documentary evidence of Hitler's attempts to establish diplomatic contact with Churchill during the critical period of late May 1940. This fact significantly weakens the version of the planned negotiations, using the encircled troops as a bargaining chip. One of the most convincing versions of Hitler's decision is related to purely military technical factors. During the rapid offensive from May 10th to May 20th, 1940, German tank units suffered significant losses. The Führer, who was well aware that it was the armored forces that were the key element of the Wehrmacht's success, closely monitored the condition of these units. Alarming reports were received from Ewald von Kleist, commander of the tank formations in the Dunkirk area. According to his reports, about half of the combat vehicles required urgent repairs. The crews, who had spent 10 days in continuous combat, showed signs of severe fatigue. The situation became more complicated on May 24th, when French troops under the command of General de Gaulle launched a powerful counteroffensive in the Abbeville area. Colonel General von Rundstedt, assessing the potential threat of this strike, made a proposal to redirect tank units to counter the French offensive, leaving the task of capturing Dunkirk to infantry units. This decision caused serious disagreements in the high command of the Wehrmacht. Such famous military leaders as Sepp Dietrich and Heinz Guderian, famous for their innovative approach to warfare, categorically disagreed with such a strategy. They insisted on continuing the active use of tank formations to complete the encirclement of the enemy. There is also a political version of what happened. The rapid successes of the German generals in the European campaign significantly strengthened their influence and authority within the Third Reich. Some historians believe that Hitler's decision could have been dictated by a desire to demonstrate his superiority over the military leaders, to show who really makes strategic decisions in the German army. The key point in understanding Hitler's decision may lie in the practical value of potential prisoners. The demoralized British divisions, retreating in panic and often abandoning heavy weapons, were hardly a significant military and political asset for the Third Reich. Organizing the detention of so many prisoners of war required enormous resources. It is important to note that, unlike the subsequent treatment of Soviet prisoners of war, European soldiers were held in conditions consistent with international conventions. This meant significant material costs for their accommodation, meals, and medical care. Moreover, almost all the military equipment and supplies of these units have already been left on the coast. In fact, it was about capturing demoralized manpower, devoid of combat potential. At the same time, an active offensive on Dunkirk would inevitably lead to serious losses among the Wehrmacht personnel. In such a situation, the German military leadership had to weigh the pros and cons. There were a large number of demoralized prisoners on the same scale, requiring significant resources for maintenance. The occupied territory of the port on the other bowl. The inevitable loss of life during the assault. The material costs of the operation. Lost time. Significant deterioration of relations with the UK. What do you think about this?